Hey guys, tonight we're tracing a war, a city, and at least three emotional breakdowns, all because one girl followed a cow to the beach. You're in ancient Phoenicia now. The sun is already too bright. The waves sparkle like someone spilled, glitter across the sea, and everything smells faintly of olives and ocean brine. You're standing on a polished limestone cliff overlooking the Mediterranean, brushing curls of sweat-damp hair from your brow. Below you, a princess is preparing for what she thinks is going to be a blissfully boring day. Her name is Europa. You've heard the name, probably. Most people think of a moon, a continent, maybe a soft focus map in a museum. But Europa, the girl, is just trying to enjoy the coastal breeze. She has that not another arranged marriage look in her eyes and a basket of spring flowers tucked into her elbow. You're walking just behind her, invisible of course, because this is bedtime history and you're a quiet ghost in the corner of every old story. Europa's attendants giggle as they skip ahead, sandals tapping against sun-warmed rock. You follow, them all toward the shore. The sea is calm today, glassy and slow, the kind of water that seems too lazy to form waves. A good day for a walk, maybe a snack, and certainly not for divine bovine abduction. That's when you see it, the cow. It's lounging by the waterline, which is already weird because cows usually prefer fields. But this one, snowy white, glossy, far too majestic to be local, is just vibing in the sand. Its eyes are unusually human. That's your first clue. Your second clue? It doesn't move its size dramatically, like someone trying out for a tragic role in a beachside play. Europa is enchanted. She sets down her basket and tiptoes toward the cow. It lets her stroke its muzzle, leans into the touch, and then, not to be subtle, kneels down, inviting her onto its back. You and Europa exchange glances. Well, she can't see you, but you definitely look at her like, "Girl, don't do it." And then she climbs on. You know how sometimes you get on a bicycle that feels suspiciously unstable, but you pedal anyway because it's sunny and you're committed? This is like that, except the bicycle is Zeus in disguise, and he's about to launch across the ocean. Before she can scream, protest, or even adjust her skirt, the cow gallops into the sea. The water parts like magic, and then you're flying. Well, galloping on waves technically, Europa clings to the cow's back, and though she's shocked, she's not entirely panicked. Mythical abduction etiquette seems to kick in quickly. Sea nymphs rise up, offering shell goblets of comfort nectar. Dolphins leap beside her like an oddly synchronized support group. You, of course, are floating calmly alongside, wondering how on earth this got normalized. The thing is, Zeus isn't even pretending anymore. The cow is glowing slightly. Lightning crackles from its tail. Europa's dress is drying instantly because thunder gods don't like laundry. And here's your one mainstream historical fact for the evening. In many of the oldest tellings, this myth was a way for ancient Greeks to explain both a natural migration pattern and the spreading of cultures. The story of Europa might have symbolized Phoenician influence stretching westward across the sea, embedding itself into Crete, into trade, into later myths and royal lineages. But we're not quite to the legacy part yet. Right now, you're just floating beside a very confused girl on a possibly magic cow. Now here's the quirky bit. Some sources, not the famous ones, but the fringe philosophers with too much time, insist that Europa actually thought the cow was just a gift from Poseidon. They say she named it Cloudy, sang to it, and planned to raise it in her garden, which makes this next bit extra awkward, because when they land on Crete, the cow turns into a man, like suddenly. Boom! 1 minute, hooves. Next minute, toga and a smirk. Zeus doesn't ease into things. He appears full-grown, fully smug, and because he's Zeus, entirely sure this will somehow end with gratitude and a baby. Europa doesn't. Faint, scream, or run. She's been raised well. Royals are trained to handle surprises, including livestock-based metamorphosis. She just sits on the beach for a bit, pokes a seashell, and probably thinks about whether it's even worth telling. Her parents, and this, dear listener, is where the story begins to wobble. Historians still argue whether Europa stayed willingly or was kept against her will, whether she saw Crete as a prison or a fresh start. Some versions frame it as romantic, others not so much. Still others suggest she negotiated a pretty sweet estate deal and became queen of the island before the next moonrise. Zeus, in a rare move of semi-decent behavior, builds her a palace, marries her, or says he does, which in Olympus terms could mean anything from eternal vows to "I'll call you." They have several children, including one very important wine-loving deity we'll meet later. But what about the missing person report? Back in Phoenicia, Europa's father is not thrilled. His favorite daughter has vanished into myth. The servants are giving very vague excuses about cows, and the royal family starts sending out her brothers to fetch her like lost luggage. One by one, they disappear too, because, surprise, no one in mythology ever successfully finds the person they're looking for. And that's how a missing cow leads to wandering brothers, foundation myths, and eventually a war over a city that started with a nap under some olive trees. So, before this gets any more chaotic, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your city and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that. Soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Europa is settling into her new role, and her brother is about to get sent on a truly confusing scavenger hunt. You'd better follow him. Bring a snack. It's going to take a while. You're still in ancient Phoenicia, only now things are a little tenser. Europa's sandals are still sitting by the shore, but she's long gone, off in Crete, probably wondering whether it's too late to ask for a refund on her mythological detour. Meanwhile, back at the palace, her father, King Agenor, is pacing a groove into the marble floor. You watch him furrow his brow, tug at his beard, and sigh into his goblet of watered wine. Losing a daughter to divine bovine flight isn't something even the most paranoid monarch prepares for. No ransom note, no dramatic lightning storm, just a sudden lack of daughter and a lot of nervous servants who all swear they saw a large animal involved. So, like any reasonable ruler with a healthy appreciation for melodrama, Agenor summons his sons. He lines them up, Cadmus, Salix, Phoenix, and Thasus, and delivers the kind of speech only mythic dads can pull off. "Go forth," he declares. "Find your sister. Do not return until she is with you." This, to be clear, is the ancient Mediterranean equivalent of being told to find a specific fish in the sea, with no boat. You walk alongside Cadmus, the brother with the most well-combed hair and the least natural sense of direction. He's carrying a satchel full of dried figs, a dagger he hopes not to use, and a look that says he already regrets this quest. He heads out with confidence, sort of. He checks under every bush for clues. He questions farmers, flirts with oracles, squints suspiciously at cows. He doesn't have much to go on, just the vague rumor that she vanished across the waves with a handsome animal. and no one seems to know which god is responsible. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Stories like Cadmus's reflect a real historical process, Phoenician explorers and colonists spreading westward, establishing cities across the Mediterranean, including on Crete, and even as far as Carthage. So, in a roundabout way, Cadmus, the mythological brother, represents a kind of cultural diffusion. He's not just searching for a sister. He's accidentally becoming an agent of civilization. Now, for the quirky bit, somewhere during his travels, probably during a rest day involving very stale bread, Cadmus ends up in Thrace, and one source insists he tried to start a detective agency. Yes, really. According to one particularly flowery poet, Cadmus got so frustrated with vague leads and misleading omens that he began offering his services as a seer of lost things, finding everything from runaway goats to a stolen silver goblet. The business never really took off. Eventually, his wandering brings him to Delphi, the spiritual help desk of the ancient world. The oracle, as always, is draped in mist and vague metaphors. You sit on a cool stone bench as Cadmus enters the sacred chamber. The air smells like burned bay leaves and wet cave moss. The priestess breathes deeply, rocks in place, and gives him a prophecy that is, as usual, only sort of helpful. She doesn't say, "Your sister's in Crete, bring a towel." No, she says, "Follow the cow, and where it rests, build your city." You look at Cadmus. Cadmus looks at the priestess. Neither of you blinks for a long time. "A cow?" he says. She nods. "A cow," he repeats, this time with more resignation. The scholars still argue over what this prophecy was supposed to mean. Some think it was a metaphor for agricultural fertility. Others suggest it was a riddle to test his faith. And then there's one academic from the 1800s who theorized that the oracle just liked messing with people and had a pet cow she was trying to get rid of. Whatever the motive, Cadmus leaves Delphi even more confused than when he arrived. But prophecy is prophecy. You don't ignore sacred cow instructions. That's how you get turned into a fig tree. So he sets out again, this time specifically looking for a cow. Not just any cow. It has to be unyoked, roaming, untamed. Basically, the kind of bovine that looks like it has somewhere important to be. And sure enough, one morning, as dawn creeps across the horizon and the air is still chilly with dew, a cow wanders by, no owner in sight. It doesn't moo. It doesn't even acknowledge Cadmus. It just walks past like it owns the road. Cadmus, seasoned quester that he now is, sighs and starts walking after it, and here begins the great cow-following expedition. It's less glamorous than you'd hope. The cow doesn't talk. It doesn't pause for dramatic effect. It just walks. Through meadows, past shepherds, up hills, down rocky paths, through a swamp that smells strongly of regret. You follow behind, marveling at how Cadmus just keeps going. He's blistered, sunburned, and being actively judged by an animal that refuses to make eye contact. But still, step after step, day after day, he follows the cow. At one point, he tries to name it. "The oracle," he mutters, "said I should. Follow you. Might as well call you Hope." The cow flicks its tail in response, unimpressed. Days pass. A bird circles overhead. A local goatherd offers Cadmus a wheel of suspicious cheese. It's fine. Everything is fine. Just a man following a cow through unknown lands. You'd think a mythic journey would involve more action, maybe a talking tree or a bandit attack, but no, just hooves on dirt, the occasional awkward campsite, and a lot of internal monologue. Cadmus is starting to question his life choices, and you can't blame him. But then, finally, the cow stops. It's a flat valley, green and open, surrounded by gentle hills. The sun is setting in one of those perfect golden arcs that makes you think of postcards and cheesy romance films. The cow lies down with a soft grunt and begins chewing some grass like it owns the place. Cadmus stares, then sits. Then, after a long moment, laughs the kind of laugh you only get from exhaustion and divine nonsense. "Well," he says, lying back in the grass, "I guess this is home now." And that, dear sleeper, is the beginning of something very big. Cadmus lies there in the grass for a while, watching the sky fade into lavender, still marveling that a cow's nap time just decided the future of a city. You, meanwhile, are trying not to think too hard about the logistics, like who's going to handle the plumbing or where they'll get building permits. But Cadmus isn't worried about any of that. He's got the biggest part done: location, location, location. The next step? A little something the oracle forgot to mention. There's a guardian serpent. Of course there is. You wake up the next morning to birds chirping, the cow snoring gently, and Cadmus stretching his arms like someone who really thought his to-do list ended yesterday. But when he goes to fetch water from the nearby spring, because you can't build a city without hydration, he notices something odd. Bones, a lot of them, piled near the edge of the forest, arranged in ways that strongly suggest whatever left them had serious opinions about intruders. Still, Cadmus is determined. He sends a few of his men ahead to collect water. After a bit of waiting, nothing. More waiting, still nothing. Eventually, Cadmus gets that oh-so-familiar "fine, I'll do it myself" look and heads in after them. The forest is darker than it should be. Thick vines hang from the trees like nature's own bead curtains, and the air smells like wet bark and overripe plums. You hear something slither, not shuffle, not trot. Slither. Then you see it, the serpent. It's huge, coiled around the spring like it's guarding an ancient vending machine. Its scales shimmer dark green with a coppery edge, and its eyes have that unnerving glow that says, "I was here before your kind knew how to boil water." According to some sources, this creature was sacred to Ares, god of war, which really just makes the situation worse. Here's your historical grounding for the day. Ancient Thebes, the city Cadmus would eventually found, really did have a foundational myth involving a dragon or serpent. In broader Near Eastern tradition, serpents often represented chaos or the primordial world, forces to be subdued by civilization. So this whole fight a snake to build a city narrative fits the era's symbolism perfectly. Cadmus doesn't have a sword forged by the gods. He doesn't have a winged horse. He has a spear, a healthy sense of panic, and the sheer stubbornness of a man who followed a cow for 3 days. What follows is less a choreographed battle and more an extremely unpleasant wrestling match with lots of yelling. You watch from behind a rock as Cadmus dodges a coil, stabs, gets flung backward, scrambles for a bigger stick, and finally manages to drive his weapon into the serpent's mouth at just the right angle. It convulses once, twice, then goes still. Cadmus stares. You stare. The cow blinks. He does what any weary warrior would do next. Sits down in the dirt and contemplates how bad his laundry situation is going to be. But wait, there's more. As he wipes serpent goo off his hands, a voice echoes from the nearby trees. You can't see the speaker, but the voice is both amused and just a little passive-aggressive. It's Athena. Because, of course, it's Athena, You've slain a sacred serpent, she says casually. You might want to balance the karma. Cadmus sighs. How? Athena explains, helpfully, in that way that's more mystical than useful, that he must plant the serpent's teeth into the ground. From them, she says, your people will grow. Now, if anyone else had said that to you, you'd assume they'd spent too much time in the sun. But when a goddess gives weird gardening advice, you dig. Cadmus buries the teeth in a wide circle, stepping back as the earth begins to churn. Fingers burst through the soil, then arms. Then, one by one, full-grown armored men rise from the fiha, dirt like confused radishes. They blink, they stretch. One sneezes. Then they all immediately start trying to kill each other. This part scholars are still debating. Some argue the Spartoi, the sown men, represent early Theban aristocracy. Others say they symbolize the brutal origins of civilization, how even society built from divine instruction starts in violence. There's even a charmingly out-there theory that they were metaphors for cornstalks, which makes the whole scene a lot less intimidating and a lot more corny. Cadmus, horrified and exhausted, does the only sensible thing. He throws a rock into the middle of the fray and ducks. The men, thinking one of them has attacked, turn on each other in confusion. In minutes, the field is still again, except for 5 men. Just 5. The rest lie scattered like the world's most unsettling crop failure. These 5 survivors look around, spot Cadmus, and immediately swear loyalty to him. Because if you grow out of someone's serpent-composted garden bed, apparently that makes them your boss. Cadmus doesn't question it. He's too tired. He just nods and mutters something, like, "Cool, welcome to HR." Together, they begin clearing the land. The cow has wandered off by now, probably to inspire someone else's myth. But Cadmus, he's laying the first foundations of Thebes, stone by stone. The ground still smells like snake, and the sown warriors argue constantly about where to put the latrines, but it's a start. And the funniest part? All this effort, danger, mystical agriculture, and semi-undead workforce is still, technically, part of Cadmus's original mission, find Europa. Except he hasn't found her. Not even close. He's just built a city by accident. You get the sense he hasn't quite realized that yet. But you do, and so do the gods, who are watching from their celestial balcony seats, probably placing bets on what he'll mess up next. You're starting to notice a pattern here. Cadmus sets out to find his sister, and instead he builds a city, slays a snake, and accidentally invents guerrilla landscaping. Still, not a bad resume. But there's a catch. This isn't ancient Greece, after all, unless the gods throw in some paperwork. And in this case, the paperwork comes in the form of divine punishment. See that snake? It wasn't just any oversized garden pest. It was sacred to Ares, the god of war. And if there's one thing Ares loves more than dramatic vengeance, it's making people wait for it. So, while Cadmus is settling in, laying down stone, carving out streets, maybe planting a fig tree, Ares is stewing, brooding, practicing his angry face in the mirror of Olympus. Eventually, the boom drops. Cadmus is sentenced to 8 years of servitude to Ares. No trial, no appeals, just a god saying, "You broke my toy, now go fix my metaphorical lawn." Now, historians and poets have had a field day trying to interpret this divine punishment. Some say the 8 years symbolize the passage from chaos to order. Cadmus has to pay for building civilization by enduring some symbolic penance. Others argue it's more of a political allegory. Cadmus's period of service is the price of borrowing divine legitimacy. And one cheeky scholar once suggested that Ares just really needed someone to help him alphabetize his war trophies. So Cadmus disappears from the public eye for a bit, off doing who knows what in the service of the god of bloodshed. You imagine? Him polishing helmets, sweeping out chariots, maybe organizing war hymn karaoke nights. It's not glamorous, but it's better than being snake food. You'd think the story might slow down here, but no. When Cadmus finally finishes his cosmic timeout and returns to Thebes, the gods do what they always do when they can't decide whether to reward or further inconvenience someone. They arrange a marriage. Enter Harmonia. She's not just a beautiful princess or a handy noble match. Harmonia is the literal daughter of Aphrodite and Ares. That's right, Love and War's genetically improbable offspring, which makes this union the mythological version of marrying into celebrity royalty. Except, instead of tabloids, you get oracles and wedding gifts that curse people. But Cadmus is thrilled. He's tired, he's lonely, and if marrying the daughter of two volatile deities will finally earn him some peace and quiet, he's all in. Now, the wedding. Oh, the wedding. You're there, under a grand tent woven from purple Tyrian dye, so expensive it could fund an entire war campaign. Ambrosia flows freely. The guest list includes everyone from Athena to Dionysus, who's already doing cartwheels in the background. There's music, dancing, probably a dramatic toast or two from Poseidon. Even Zeus shows up, mostly to flirt, with the nymphs and eye the cake. But here's the standout feature, the gifts. Harmonia receives a necklace and a robe, both designed by Hephaestus, the divine craftsman. They're gorgeous, sure. The necklace sparkles with an unnatural gleam, and the robe shimmers like moonlight on water. But there's a problem. These are not your average best wishes wedding presents. These are cursed, like very cursed, depending on which version of the myth you hear over your cup of watered wine. The necklace dooms its wearers to tragedy, and the robe brings misfortune with every fold. It's the mythological equivalent of getting a blender that whispers ominous secrets. When you turn it on, historians still debate the original purpose of these items. Were they revenge gifts from Hephaestus, who was jealous of Aphrodite's affair with Ares? Were they symbols of the double-edged nature of divine favor? Or were they simply plot devices with excellent taste in accessories? No matter the motive, Cadmus and Harmonia accept the gifts with smiles because you don't turn down presents from Olympians, even if they hum slightly when you hold them too long. Still, for a while, things go surprisingly well. Cadmus rules Thebes. Harmonia brings grace, balance, and an uncanny ability to diffuse arguments with a look. The Sown men help rebuild, though they still argue over where to put the market stalls. A temple is raised. Children are born. Music drifts from open courtyards. The city begins to hum with life. But if you're getting comfortable, don't, because nothing in Greek myth stays idyllic for long. There's always a storm building on the horizon, and in this case, it's a particularly petty one. Family drama, divine grudges, and that cursed necklace will eventually rear their ugly heads. Still, for now, you take a breath. You walk Thebes' cobbled streets. You smell the olive oil in the markets, hear the bronze tools clinking in the workshops. You pass a woman baking honey cakes shaped like tiny birds. A little boy chases a goat in circles. Cadmus leans on a pillar, tired but proud, watching a city he didn't mean to build thrive beneath the sun. The cow, wherever she is, would be pleased, and maybe, just maybe, Cadmus thinks about Europa. His sister, still missing, still a question mark trailing behind him like dust from his sandals. He never did find her, but in searching he found something else entirely. You wonder if that's enough. Time passes in Thebes the way time creeps up a garden wall, slowly, almost lazily, but with surprising insistence. The city grows. Cadmus and Harmonia have children, one after the other, each more tangled in fate than the last. If this were a family newsletter, you'd probably get a scroll in the mail that reads, "We're thriving. The palace roof doesn't leak. The olives are fat this year, and only 2 or 3 prophecies have predicted doom this week. Hope you're well." And yet, something always lingers beneath the surface, a sense that the gods are never quite finished with Cadmus. It begins, as all drama does, with the children. Their daughter Ino marries a mortal and ends up involved in one of those unfortunate child-rearing incidents that only happens in mythology: jealous stepmothers, boiling cauldrons, divine rescues by dolphins. It's a whole thing. Then there's Semele, who gets wooed by Zeus, never a good sign. She insists on seeing him in his true divine form. He complies because he's Zeus, and never thinks more than 3 seconds ahead. She's immediately incinerated because mortal eyeballs and supreme cosmic radiance aren't friends. But out of her ashes is born Dionysus, the future god of wine revelry and moderately irresponsible decision-making. Cadmus, bless him, raises Dionysus himself for a while. You picture him trying to keep up with a toddler who turns grape juice into actual wine and insists on throwing toga-themed tea parties. Historians still argue whether Cadmus was simply fulfilling a familial obligation or being used by the gods to prepare the boy for his eventual divine promotion. Either way, it's exhausting. Then there's Autonoa, another daughter whose son Actaeon is famously mauled by his own hunting dogs after accidentally glimpsing Artemis bathing. Let that be a lesson. In ancient Greece, even eye contact can ruin your week, but it's Agave's story that really shatters Cadmus. Her son, Pentheus, grows into a stern, no-nonsense type who thinks all this Dionysian partying is undignified. So when Dionysus returns to Thebes to introduce his wild rites, Pentheus resists hard. He bans the worship, mocks the rituals, and declares the wine god a fraud. Now Dionysus may be the god of drunken joy, but he's got a vindictive streak, wider than the Nile. He casts a spell over the Theban women, including Agave, driving them into a frenzy. When Pentheus sneaks out to spy on their mountain revelry, they mistake him for a wild animal. His own mother, in her madness, leads the charge. Cititum. It's not great. The morning after, as the spell fades and Agave comes to, she realizes the lion she so proudly slew as her son. Her grief is the kind that doesn't make a sound. Cadmus watches from the steps of his palace, too old now to shout, too wise to be shocked. This is the part where he realizes the truth. The gods always collect. The wedding gifts were never free. The necklace, now passed down like an antique filled with bees, has tainted everything it touches. He has done everything right, or tried to. He built a city. He honored the gods. He raised their wine-loving demigod and married their war-loved daughter. And yet tragedy has clung to him like ivy on stone. So Cadmus makes a decision. He resigns. Not with a flourish or a revolt, but with the quiet resolve of someone who has finally had enough divine meddling. He abdicates the throne, hands over the city, and takes Harmonia's hand. They leave Thebes behind. You trail them on their journey, feeling the weight in each step. They travel east, far from the cursed streets and the echoes of grief. Their sandals wear thin. They sleep under stars that don't speak Greek. In one village, Cadmus teaches the locals to read. In another, Harmonia teaches them to sew. They are simply human. Two souls trying to start over, but even here, fate follows like a stray dog. In one particularly strange version of the myth, they're captured by a barbarian tribe, and because this is Greek mythology, they somehow end up leading the people, teaching them how to live like proper Hellenes. You imagine Cadmus standing on a log, explaining irrigation, while Harmonia draws olive trees in the dirt. And then, when it seems their story might finally end in a quiet old age, the gods return. This time, they don't come with punishment, or gifts, or prophecies. They come with transformation. Cadmus and Harmonia, the weary pair who've seen more divine drama than a whole season of Olympian housewives, are turned into serpents. Yes, snakes. There are a few interpretations here. Some say it's punishment. Others say it's a strange reward. A symbol of rebirth, immortality, a full circle return to the creature Cadmus once slew. But there they are, two serpents slithering side by side, gliding through forests and myths alike. Maybe it's better this way. No more thrones, no more curses, just the sound of leaves brushing your scales and the occasional squirrel for lunch. And if you listen closely, you can still hear them, Cadmus and Harmonia, coiled together beneath a shady fig tree, whispering stories into the roots, waiting for the world to forget their names. But we're not done with Europa yet. Remember her? The girl whose casual bovine abduction kick-started this whole mythological domino chain? While Cadmus was out building cities, slaying snakes, and getting cursed via wedding gift, Europa was adjusting to her new life in Crete, and, brace yourself, it wasn't all bad. You open your eyes under a bright Cretan sun, the kind that makes the sea look like melted lapis. Birds trill in a cypress tree. Somewhere in the distance, a flute plays the kind of melody that makes goats sway slightly off rhythm. This is the island of King Minos, Europa's new home, and honestly, she's doing better than expected for someone who was kidnapped by a love-struck god disguised as a livestock. Zeus, in his infinite romantic delusion, lavished her with gifts. Some say he gave her a robot guard dog made of bronze, Talos, who ran laps around the island to keep pirates and ex-boyfriends away. Others claim he gave her a magical javelin that never missed, because nothing says "I love you" like a weaponized spear. And then there were the kids. Europa gave birth to several children by Zeus, including Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Sarpedon, each of whom would go on to have deeply complicated resumes. In the mythology department, Minos, for example, would become the famed king of Crete, ruling from a palace so vast and winding that later generations would confuse it for a literal labyrinth. Spoiler alert, it kind of was. Historians still argue whether Europa ruled in her own right. Some say she became a queen consort, quietly influential. Others believe she may have been a religious figure, a high priestess, whose cult of worship blended seamlessly into early Minoan society. And then there's the theory that Zeus, after his usual celestial ghosting, left her with enough wealth and prestige that she carved out her own small empire among the island's volcanic ridges. You imagine her standing atop the palace walls, a woman who once rode across the sea on a god cow, now overseeing ships packed with saffron, tin, and pottery. Her sons argue in the courtyard. The servants paint dolphins on the walls. She adjusts the gold band around her wrist and thinks, just for a moment, of her brother Cadmus still searching. Europa never sees him again, but her legacy doesn't vanish. Minos grows into a stern, rule-obsessed monarch with a beard that probably smells faintly of seawater and bureaucracy. He marries Pasiphae, a daughter of the sun god Helios, and builds that famous labyrinth, home, of course, to the Minotaur, who, depending on your preferred version of the myth, is either a divine punishment, an architectural oversight, or an extremely niche metaphor for bad parenting. Meanwhile, Rhadamanthus becomes a judge of the dead, a literal judge. In the underworld, imagine Europa explaining that at brunch. One of my sons runs Crete, and the other decides your eternal punishment. I'm so proud. Sarpedon, the third son, fights in the Trojan War on the side of the Trojans. He dies heroically, which in Greek myth is the only kind of career option if you're born from Zeus and not cursed to be turned into a shrub. Back in Crete, Europa vanishes slowly from the records, like steam rising off a hot amphora. No one quite agrees on how her story ends. Some say she remarried, others say she faded into legend, becoming a local deity of fertility and gentle rains. And in one particularly poetic version, she simply walks into the sea one morning, her dress flowing behind her like foam, and never returns. You sit by that shore now, listening to the waves lap against smooth pebbles. Somewhere beneath the surf, a memory lingers, not just of Europa the myth, but Europa the person, the girl who was stolen, but who built something lasting out of it. And then there's the cow you'd almost forgotten, hadn't you? Because Europa's journey began with that quiet meadow, those slow blinking eyes, and a soft nose that nuzzled her hand, before tossing her on its back and galloping straight into legend. Historians and poets alike have tried to decode what the cow actually symbolized. Was it Zeus flexing his ability to reinvent tinder using livestock? A metaphor for the seduction of power? An agricultural icon wrapped in romance and thunderbolts? Or maybe it was simpler. Maybe it was a symbol of transition, of being led gently, confusingly, into the next chapter of your life without knowing what's ahead. Just like Cadmus, just like Harmonia, and maybe, just like you, because sometimes life doesn't come with fanfare or explanation. Sometimes it's just a cow in a field that says, "Hop on, we're leaving now." And you do. By now, you're probably wondering, what exactly was the deal with cows in Greek myth? Because they keep showing up. They're not just scenery, they're symbols, stand-ins for power, fertility, deception, and the occasional divine prank. In fact, if you squint hard enough, the entire ancient Mediterranean seems to have been run by cattle and the people who took them too seriously. You're standing now on a dusty slope in Boeotia, sandals full of pebbles, watching a herd of long-horned oxen slowly make their way down a hill. One stops to stare at you. You stare back. There's a moment of understanding, a solemn nod. This cow knows things. Let's zoom out. The ancient Greeks weren't just cow appreciators, they were deeply cow-reliant. These animals represented wealth, stability, and divine favor. If your herd was healthy, so were your prospects. If your herd got struck by lightning or wandered into the sea chasing a suspiciously charismatic bull, well, time to panic. That's why God so often chose cows as their disguise of choice. Zeus wasn't alone. Poseidon once seduced a woman by transforming into a stallion, yes, but that's horse stuff. The cow was calmer, trickier. It could wander, passed unnoticed, lowing softly, until boom, you're in Crete with 3 demigod sons and a robot butler. And cows weren't just plot devices. They were also currency. A dowry could be measured in cows. Sacrifices? Cows. Funerals? Cows again. Even certain philosophical metaphors were full of cow references, though Plato never quite managed a whole dialogue on bovine ethics. Missed opportunity, really. The cow Cadmus followed, that silent guide across mountains and rivers, wasn't just a divine signpost. It was an invitation to surrender, to let go of control and follow fate on 4 legs. Think of it as a GPS powered by destiny and cud. Historians still argue whether Cadmus's cow was an incarnation of a specific deity. Some say Hera, others say Demeter, in disguise, or perhaps it was simply a sacred animal set loose by the gods, as part of a larger plan that no mortal was ever meant to understand. Either way, that cow was sacred. When it stopped on that hill near the spring guarded by the serpent, Cadmus knew better than to ignore it. That's why he sacrificed it, not in a moment of cruelty, but as an act of reverence. In Greek thought, the sacred and the practical often blurred together like wine into water. You honored the gods by offering what was precious, and cows, extremely precious. In some versions, the hide of that very cow was used to decorate the first altar in Thebes. Imagine the beginnings of a city literally stitched together with destiny, as if to say, here lies the origin, meaty, strange, and profoundly sacred. But wait, let's return to Europa one last time. Her name becomes more than just a myth. Over centuries, poets and mapmakers alike begin to use Europa not just as a character, but as a concept, an idea. Eventually, as you may have noticed, the name sticks to an entire continent. Historians still debate how exactly this happened. Was it political convenience, linguistic drift, a romantic gesture toward a myth that captured the imagination of thousands? Probably a bit of everything, but the result is oddly poetic. A whole landmass named for a girl swept away by a talking cow. And so, when you look at a globe, when your finger traces the outline of Europe's western coastlines, remember this. You're not just looking at geography. You're looking at mythology fossilized into maps, at a prank-turned epic, at a continent named not for conquest or empire, but for a girl who once giggled on a sunlit beach and climbed onto the back of something she did not understand. You picture her again, Europa, brushing sand from her dress, her hair caught by the sea breeze, staring into the distance as the bull beneath her muscles forward through the surf. She doesn't know where she's going, only that it's forward, away, toward a life that will become story, then legend, then continent. So, yes, one cow started a war, another founded a city, and across the ancient world, cows served as the unlikeliest bearers of fate, grazing, guiding, appearing in dreams and vanishing into forests. They were vessels of the divine disguised as dinner. You stretch out now in a field outside Thebes, the grass soft, the breeze warm. Somewhere nearby, a cow shifts its weight and flicks its tail at a fly. You close your eyes and listen, not just for hoofbeats or the lowing hum, but for the quiet truth beneath it all, that sometimes life turns not. You're standing now in a little Greek town where the roads are still made of dust and occasional philosophical banter. The smell of olives hangs in the air, and someone is trying to sell you honey in a clay pot the size of your head. You politely decline. You've got bigger things on your mind, namely, how something as simple as a cow and a confused brother wandering around could unravel into a whole celestial soap opera. Because now, finally, we circle back to that spring near Thebes, the one with the serpent, you remember. Cadmus's sacred cow had stopped, laid down, and probably looked at him like, "Okay, buddy, this is your moment." But it wasn't a peaceful scene. That spring was sacred to Ares, the god of war, and it had a guardian, a serpent, often called a dragon, just to keep things spicy. This wasn't a cuddly Disney-style dragon either. This thing was large, irritable, and very territorial. It wasn't into sharing its water source with sweaty mortals and their mythic cows. You're Cadmus. Now, you've built a little altar. You've just finished sacrificing the cow, probably muttering apologies the whole time. And now your soldiers, those rare few you had left after years of wandering, head down to the spring to fetch water. And they don't come back, because, of course, they've been eaten. So now it's just you and the dragon, and Cadmus, though probably very tired of mythological nonsense by this point, knows what has to be done. He slays the dragon. Details vary. Some say it was a swift strike to the neck, others say a full battle, but the result is the same. One very dead guardian serpent and a god, Ares, who is now extremely not pleased. Here's the part where it gets weird. Athena shows up. She's always been the god's unofficial cleanup crew. Wherever Zeus's messes go, Athena tends to pop in with a plan and a mild look of exasperation. She tells Cadmus to remove the dragon's teeth and plant them in the ground. And for some reason, possibly because at this point Cadmus will do literally anything a god tells him, he obeys. So he plants dragon teeth, like they're daffodil bulbs. And what happens? Men sprout from the soil. Yes, full-grown armed warriors. Erupt out of the dirt, blinking in the sun and looking around like, okay, who do we stab? They immediately start fighting each other, which given the nature of their birth seems oddly fitting. No toddler phase, no awkward adolescence, just birth, sword, chaos. Only 5 survive. Cadmus, once again channeling his inner HR manager, tells them to chill out and form a team. These 5 men, the Spardoi or Sown men, become the first citizens of Thebes, which means the city's founding population literally sprang from the teeth of a dead serpent. Historians still argue whether this tale is an allegory for settler conflict, agricultural symbolism, or a particularly dramatic way to describe militia recruitment. But whatever the truth, it's clear the Greeks had a flair for metaphor. In their version of city planning, you don't need blueprints. You need fangs, divine intervention, and a lot of post-battle counseling. And Ares? Oh, he doesn't forget. Cadmus killed his pet snake. That kind of thing tends to stick. So as penance, Cadmus is sentenced to serve Ares for 8 years. Not clear exactly what that entailed. Some say it was servitude, others say a kind of spiritual debt. But either way, Cadmus submits. He doesn't argue. By now he's fluent in divine weirdness, probably fills out the paperwork without blinking. It's a quiet kind of justice. No lightning bolts, no smiting, just years of patient repayment for one violent act. You can almost hear Cadmus muttering under his breath, "I followed a cow. I didn't sign up for any of this." And yet, through this unlikely chain, cow, dragon, teeth, soldiers, Thebes is born, a real city, a future home for countless myths, Oedipus, Antigone, tragic kings, and cursed bloodlines. But none of that has happened yet. Right now, it's just Cadmus and 5 slightly traumatized warrior farmers looking at the foundation stones and wondering how to build something real from so many broken beginnings. The wind stirs the grass. You can still see the bones of the serpent half buried near the spring, now quiet. The soil is dry but fertile. One of the Spartoi sneezes. Another starts drawing a floor plan in the dirt with his spear. And you? You lie down in the sun, arms folded beneath your head, wondering at the strange poetry of it all. A cow walks. A hawk man follows. A city blooms from fangs. Only in Greek myth, you think, could agriculture and divine warfare combine so seamlessly. So now Thebes is officially a thing. Congratulations. Your accidental city has roots, a workforce, and a founding myth that would make any historian's eyebrow twitch. And yet, despite the divine grudges, serpentine landscaping, and warrior, seed packets, the gods aren't done meddling with Cadmus just yet. You're still in his sandals, still a little dusty from dragon teeth and haunted by bovine memories. But life has finally started to settle into a groove. You've got a small but thriving city. You've survived 8 years of divine probation under Ares, probably doing grunt work no one wanted to write poems about. So, naturally, the next thing the gods send you is a wife. But not just any wife. Her name is Harmonia, and she's the daughter of Ares and Aphrodite, which makes her, in mythological terms, dangerously overqualified. She's a goddess of harmony, of course, but also of diplomacy, balance, and the sort of grace that you, sweaty city founder that you are, absolutely do not feel worthy of, which is probably the point. Historians still argue whether Harmonia was a peace offering from the gods, a kind of celestial, sorry we ruined your road trip, or a subtle curse. After all, Ares and Aphrodite weren't exactly a model couple. Their love affair was passionate, scandalous, and famously chaotic. So it's anyone's guess what their daughter might bring to the table. But let's focus on the wedding. The gods attend, all of them, in full Olympian fashion. You imagine the sheer logistics. Hera nitpicking the seating chart, Dionysus getting into the wine early, Hermes losing track of time because he was busy pickpocketing Poseidon. And the gifts? Oh, they're divine. Literally, the one that matters. Most, though, is a necklace. Given to Harmonia by Hephaestus, the god of blacksmithing, who, minor detail, also happens to be Aphrodite's long-suffering husband. There's a lot of unspoken tension here. If Olympus had a gossip column, it would have exploded that day. The necklace is stunning, golden, etched with symbols older than the Titans. Depending on the version, it either grants eternal beauty or immense power, or more accurately, a boatload of misery, because this necklace cursed. Hephaestus, in a moment of divine pettiness, cursed it so that every woman who wears it will suffer tragedy. It's a glittery Pandora's box, and poor Harmonia doesn't know she's wearing doom around her neck like it's just another bridal accessory. Still, the wedding is glorious. There are hymns and lyres, ambrosia and sacrificial smoke. Even the mortals get to join in, feasting on honey cakes and dancing in the streets. It's said that this union between a mortal man and a divine woman marks a rare moment of harmony between heaven and earth. For a while, life is good. Cadmus and Harmonia rule Thebes together. They have children, daughters mostly, each one destined for her own mythological chaos. Semele, for example, who will one day become the mother of Dionysus after a brief but fiery encounter with Zeus. But for now, the kids are young, the palace is peaceful, and the city begins to thrive. And here's your fringe tidbit for the section. According to one lesser-known version of the myth, Cadmus and Harmonia were turned into snakes in their old age, not as punishment, but as a weird sort of reward. The gods apparently looked down and thought, "You two have been through a lot. Let's make you slither around together for eternity." You pause on that image for a moment. Two old souls, scaled and silent, coiled beside each other under an olive tree somewhere. Not exactly your typical retirement plan, but in a strange way, fitting. Still, the necklace remains, passed down from daughter to daughter like a ticking time bomb dressed up in glamour. Each generation wears it, each generation suffers. The curse doesn't fade. It adapts, like a mythological version of malware. Historians still debate the eye necklace's origins. Was it made by Hephaestus alone? Or was it forged in the forges of chaos itself? Some even say it was once worn by Pandora before her box-opening days. Others claim it carries the grief of Aphrodite's many betrayals, solidified into metal. But in any case, it's a symbol that beauty and destruction often walk hand in hand, that gifts from the gods are rarely just that, and that sometimes a wedding is the beginning of the curse, not the end. Back in Thebes, the couple carries on. They hold festivals, argue over architectural choices, and likely try to keep their daughters from sneaking off with suspiciously handsome strangers. Life, despite everything, moves on, and you, reclining under a fig tree just outside the palace walls, can almost believe that the chaos is over. That maybe, just maybe, Cadmus has finally earned his peace. But you know better. This is Greek myth, and nothing stays boring forever. You awaken, metaphorically of course, under the Theban sun. The cicadas are loud, but your thoughts are louder because we're entering a new phase of this drama. If founding Thebes was the main act, then what comes next is the unraveling. And like any good myth, it doesn't come from outside. It starts at home. You're sitting in the palace now, watching Cadmus age slowly, gracefully, in that way only mythological mortals ever do. His daughters are grown. The city is strong. But there's a creeping tension in the marble, the sort that comes not from war, but from omens, strange dreams, and gods who never truly move on. Let's talk about Semele. She's one of Cadmus and Harmonia's daughters, the quiet one, if such a label can even apply in a mythological context. Her story is arguably the most famous among her siblings, and it begins with a visit from Zeus, because of course it does. Zeus, ever the fan of romance by lightning bolt, becomes enamored with Semele. She's young, beautiful, and, most fatally, mortal. You can already guess how this ends, but let's enjoy the build-up. He courts her in disguise, as he often does, sweet words, secret meetings, promises of eternal affection. The usual Olympian package. But here's where things get spicy. Not in the modern sense, mind you, but in the ruined by petty deities sense. Hera, Zeus's long-suffering wife, finds out. And instead of smiting her husband, which would make sense, but mythology has other ideas, she zeroes in on Semele. Hera disguises herself as an old woman, visits Semele, and plants a seed of doubt. Are you sure he's Zeus? Has he shown you his real form? Semele, understandably curious and now emotionally baited, asked Zeus to reveal himself in his full divine glory. A rookie mistake, Zeus warns her, pleads even, but she insists, and because he'd sworn an oath on the river Styx, a binding divine contract, he has no choice. He reveals himself as a storm of thunder, lightning, and celestial fire. Semele is instantly incinerated. Poof, gone. Now, if you're lying in bed wondering, wait, Is this the same necklace daughter from earlier? Yes. And that cursed necklace? Still around her neck when she burns. Some versions of the myth imply that it intensifies her destruction, like pouring oil on a bonfire, but from that fire something survives. A child, Zeus, showing the first sliver of parental instinct in mythological. History rescues the unborn baby from the ashes. He sews the child into his own thigh because wombs were apparently in short supply, and carries him to term. That baby? Dionysus, god of wine, revelry, madness, and theater, also known as the only Olympian born from both fire and divine stitching. Historians still argue whether Dionysus's birth symbolizes resurrection, the cycle of vegetation, or just a poetic excuse for wild parties. But no matter the interpretation, his existence brings lasting fame and more chaos to Cadmus's lineage. Meanwhile, back in Thebes, Cadmus and Harmonia are not exactly celebrating. One of their daughters is dead. Another, Ino, is on a slow burn trajectory toward madness and sea-related tragedy. The remaining family members, scattered, disgraced, or cursed by proximity, and that necklace, it keeps circulating. Like a terrible family heirloom, it passes from daughter to daughter, generation to generation. It ends up with Polynices, one of Oedipus's sons. He uses it to bribe Eurypyle to send her husband to war, and that, too, ends in disaster. The necklace has a flawless track record of ruination. You sit now in a quiet corner of the palace garden. There is a carved fountain here, 2 dolphins, mouths eternally pouring water, though one of them leaks at the base. It smells faintly of rosemary and smoke. Cadmus, you imagine, stands nearby. His back is bent. His eyes are tired. He's seen cities rise, serpents fall, daughters turn to ash, gods crash weddings, and fate wear pearls. He must be asking himself, was it worth it? And you, dear listener, curled under a blanket somewhere far from ancient Thebes, are wondering the same. All of this, all from following one cow. That cow feels 1,000 years away now, but its hooves are still echoing through everything. Here's your quirky detail. In some Roman versions of the story, Cadmus was actually the inventor of letters, the Phoenician alphabet brought to Greece. The man who, after losing his sister, founded not just a city, but literacy itself. Imagine that. You go out to find your sibling and come back with vowels. But even the gift of language didn't save his legacy from curses. You glance at Harmonia, now still poised, still regal, still wearing that necklace. She smiles at Cadmus like she knows what's coming, because the final act of their lives is slithering closer. You can feel it in the air now, like the cool hush before a summer storm. The gods, perhaps momentarily distracted by other mythological messes, are shifting their gaze back to Thebes and Cadmus, once the clever prince, dragon slayer, and city founder, is starting to feel like he's overstayed his welcome. You're sitting by the palace gates now. They creak with age, much like Cadmus himself. The city has grown, walls taller, streets busier, but there's an odd stillness to it, like the people sense something unresolved, something coiled tight, ready to snap. Cadmus, for all his wisdom, seems to know that his time is nearly up. There's an old myth that says mortals who build cities are cursed to watch them crumble, and Cadmus, unfortunately, is a textbook example. One by one, his descendants fall to tragedy. Semele, gone. Ino, driven mad and leaping into the sea with her child. Agave, another daughter, will soon murder her own son in a Bacchic frenzy. We'll get there, trust me. The gods gave Cadmus a wife, a kingdom, and a legend. And now they're slowly taking it all back. But Cadmus isn't entirely helpless. No, he still has some dramatic flair left. According to one version of the story, in his old age, Cadmus starts to suspect that everything, the curses, the tragedies, the general divine chaos, might stem from killing that original dragon, the sacred serpent of Ares. And you remember that, right? The one he speared in the face after it ate half his friends? Yeah, that one. So Cadmus, now white-haired and more philosophical than murderous, decides to atone. He declares that if the gods are punishing him for killing a serpent, then maybe, just maybe, he should become one. You can almost picture the announcement, a quiet afternoon in the palace courtyard. Cadmus stands up, leans heavily on his staff, and says, "If the gods want a serpent, fine, I'll be a serpent." Historians still debate whether this moment was poetic resignation, a kind of cosmic irony, or simply the writers of myth tying up loose ends in the strangest way possible. Either way, the transformation begins. In some tellings, Cadmus is turned into a serpent by the gods as a punishment, or a mercy. In others, he and Harmonia both voluntarily shed their human forms, coiling into their final mythological metamorphosis together. You can imagine the scene. A dusky grove outside Thebes, shadows long, air still. Cadmus stands beside Harmonia, who hasn't aged a day, because goddesses don't. They hold hands, and slowly their feet vanish, their legs fuse, their eyes flicker golden, their skin ripples into scales. No pain, just a slow, inevitable slide into something ancient. And yes, you probably won't survive this either, because who among us could transform into a snake with dignity? Still, there's a strange piece to it. Two figures tangled together, disappearing into myth. Quirky tidbit for you. In some local Greek traditions, people believed that certain burial mounds contained the sleeping forms of Cadmus and Harmonia, that they hadn't died exactly, but were waiting underground as serpents, coiled and dreaming. You imagine kids dared each other to knock on the mound and whisper things like, "Wake up, founders," before running off screaming. And what about that necklace? Still cursed, still circulating. Long after Cadmus has slithered into eternity, it passes through generations, destroying lives with unnerving consistency. At some point, it ends up in Delphi, dedicated at the Temple of Apollo, presumably to stop the damage. Though you know how, well, that usually works. As for Thebes, well, it survives. Sort of. It continues through multiple wars, rulers, and Oedipal tragedies. But its glory days always hearken back to Cadmus, the man who followed a cow, fought a dragon, planted soldiers, married a goddess, invented letters, and turned into a snake. All in a single life. You, lounging on your pillow, might be wondering, was Cadmus cursed or simply unlucky? Historians still argue that. Some say he was punished for overreaching, trying to found a city without divine permission. Others say he was rewarded in the only way Greek myths ever reward people, by telling their story forever, regardless of how it ends. You hear the wind shift now. Maybe it's just your fan. But it sounds like dry leaves blowing across a temple. Floor, Thebes fades, Cadmus coils, Harmonia follows, and far away the gods laugh. You're drifting now, but don't nod off just yet. We've got one more family thread to follow, and it's a doozy. Remember Agave? She's the sister of Semele and Ino, another daughter of Cadmus and Harmonia. She's kept mostly out of trouble until now, which in a Greek myth is usually a bad sign. If your name hasn't come up in tragedy yet, it means yours is still being written. Agave has a son, Pentheus. Name's got a certain mythological crispness to it, doesn't it? Sharp consonants, tragic undertones. He's young, ambitious, not entirely fond of divine shenanigans. And he inherits the throne of Thebes after Cadmus retires, presumably to his new snake-shaped life. So, there's Pentheus, trying to run a sensible, orderly kingdom when who comes rolling into town but his? Half-uncle, half-cousin. It's Greek myth, don't ask too many questions. Dionysus. Yes, that Dionysus, the god of wine, theater, ecstasy, and dangerous interpretive dancing. Pentheus does not vibe with Dionysus. He's a straight-laced sort. Thinks people should work hard, keep their robes on, and avoid setting things on fire, just because a flute sounds kind of catchy. And Dionysus, being a god and also a deeply sarcastic spirit of chaos, is not exactly thrilled by the pushback. Pentheus bans the Bacchic rites, the nighttime worship of Dionysus involving torches, drums, masks, and often a complete lack of pants. It's not just a religious crackdown, it's a social mistake. These rites were a release valve, especially for women in rigid patriarchal structures. Pentheus, bless him, is stepping on a very volatile beehive. Dionysus decides to teach him a lesson, and by lesson we mean unhinged magical vengeance dressed up as performance art. He rolls into Thebes in disguise, long hair, soft voice, foreign clothes. He charms the Theban women, including Agave, whispers to them, hypnotizes them, leads them into the mountains to dance by moonlight and pretend they're panthers. And Pentheus? He gets curious. Dionysus offers him a disguise. Women's clothes, makeup, a little veil. Come see what the fuss is about, he purrs. Pentheus, ever the proud skeptic, agrees. He tiptoes into the Bacchic madness in drag, peeking through the trees, and that's when it all falls apart. The women see him, not as Pentheus, but as a lion. The spell is thick now. They pounce. And leading the pack, his mother, Agave. She tears him apart piece by piece, convinced she's slaying a wild beast. Only afterward, when she returns to the city, still holding his head like a hunting trophy, does the fog lift. Agave looks down. The mask cracks. She sees what's in her hands. Not twist, a lion, her son. It's one of the darkest turns in the Cadmean saga, and the kind that leaves a stain on myth. Even after thousands of years, you lie still, eyes closed, and you imagine that moment in Thebes, a mother screaming, a crown in the dust, a god smirking somewhere far above. And this is where the scholarly debates kick in. Some argue Pentheus represents the rigidity of law and order, unable to bend without breaking. Others say Dionysus, for all his mirth, is a terrifying force of nature. Disrespect him, and the cost is your very self. But what's most fascinating is Agave. She's the one left standing. The curse of Cadmus's line once again lands squarely on a woman's shoulders. She's exiled, not killed, just sent off, haunted, burdened with a guilt that never truly dissipates. And what of the city? Well, Thebes keeps going, because cities always do, even when their stories are soaked in blood and wine. New kings, new tragedies. Oedipus is just around the corner, waiting in the wings. Literally, and the cow? That poor, patient animal that led Cadmus here in the first place? Long gone. Buried somewhere beneath the stones of a city it accidentally helped found. A ghostly bovine footnote in a lineage of cursed royals and divine mishaps. quirky detail time. Dionysus was one of the few Greek gods to have actual initiated mystery cults, religious rites so secret that even today archaeologists are left scratching their heads over the symbols and songs. Imagine worship so effective, you're still baffling scholars in 2025. So here you are, lying quietly, drifting at the edge of sleep, and wondering if a story that starts with a cow should really end with a dismemberment. But this is Greek mythology. There are no clean exits, only cautionary tales. You shift your pillow slightly, the room is dim. Your thoughts swirl like mist on Mount Cithaeron, where women once danced and a king once fell. And Thebes? It waits for the next myth to roll in. By now you're probably thinking, surely Thebes has earned a break, a vacation, maybe a nice quiet century where nobody is cursed, nobody turns into a tree or a snake or a headline. But no, Thebes isn't finished with you yet, because just when you thought the family tree of Cadmus couldn't possibly bear another rotten fruit, it sprouts a tragedy with legs, riddles, and a very awkward family dinner. That's right. It's time for Oedipus. Now, depending on your myth exposure, Oedipus might ring some bells, mostly of the you variety. But tonight, we're gliding through the story with a soft voice and zero judgment. You're in good hands. Oedipus, whose name rather unhelpfully means swollen foot, is the great-grandson of Cadmus. His story begins before he's even born, when his parents, King Laius and Queen Jocasta, get a visit from the oracle. Always a good way to ruin your day. The prophecy? Your son will kill you, Laius, and marry your wife. Yikes. So Laius, in classic mythological dad fashion, orders baby Oedipus to be left on a mountainside with his ankles pinned. And you thought your family had issues, but fate, as usual, laughs. In the face of parental planning, a shepherd finds the baby, takes pity, hands him off to another royal family in Corinth, where he's raised as their own. Oedipus grows up never suspecting he's adopted, until one day someone drunkenly suggests it at a party. Classic myth move. Oedipus, shaken, visits the oracle at Delphi to get the truth. Instead, he hears the same cursed prophecy. He will kill his father and marry his mother. He flees Corinth immediately, thinking this will protect his parents. You're shaking your head already, because you know how this ends. On the road to Thebes, Oedipus gets into a scuffle with a grouchy old man at a crossroads, who just so happens to be his real father, King Laius. Words are exchanged, tempers flare, swords are drawn, and, well, let's just say Laius won't be attending any more royal banquets. Oedipus continues to Thebes, where he finds the city held hostage by a riddling sphinx. Half lion, half woman, full-time gatekeeping menace, she poses a riddle. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? Oedipus, having had a rough week, nails the answer. A human, the Sphinx, utterly outwitted and very on-brand, hurls herself off a cliff, and just like that, Thebes is free. The people cheer. The queen, Jocasta, recently widowed, though no one knows Oedipus is the culprit, marries the young hero. And Oedipus becomes king. You sigh, because it could have ended there. Really, it almost does. There's peace, children, a solid stretch of normalcy, but the gods, they keep receipts. Years later, a plague strikes Thebes. Crops wither, livestock die. People start coughing ominously. Oedipus, ever the fixer, vows to find the cause. Cue a deeply awkward investigation. One clue leads to another. Slowly, painfully, the truth unravels. He is the killer of Laius. He is the son of Jocasta, and he has fulfilled the prophecy unknowingly. You lie back, staring at your ceiling, and wonder how Oedipus felt in that moment. Not just the horror, but the cosmic exhaustion. The realization that no matter how many good intentions you have, sometimes a cow starts walking and your great-great-granddad follows it, and suddenly you're married to your mother. It's a domino effect of divine design. Quirky. Footnote here, Sophocles' play Oedipus Rex became so famous that Oedipus complex entered modern psychology. Freud really latched onto it, projecting enough issues to fill a therapy wing. And the scholarly debate, it still rages. Some say Oedipus is a victim of fate. Others argue he had agency, and pride led him there. Some even see the story as a metaphor for the human quest for truth, how seeing too clearly can destroy you. Back in the myth, Jocasta realizes the truth and takes her own life. Oedipus blinds himself, not out of guilt exactly, but because he finally sees, and he can't bear it. He exiles himself from Thebes. Wanders, staff in hand, eyes bandaged, a living cautionary tale. And once again, Thebes weathers the storm, still standing, still cursed. You. Pull your blanket higher, because Thebes, for all its dramas and disasters, starts to feel oddly comforting. Like a bedtime story you've heard 1,000 times and still lean in for the ending. The cow, the dragon, the dancing women, the riddles. They swirl together into something oddly soothing. Thebes may never rest, but you can. So here you are, nestled deeper under the covers, heart rate slowing, the dim memory of riddles and royal mishaps drifting further into the fog of sleep. But we have one last path to follow in Thebes, one last piece of the Cadmean curse to unspool, and wouldn't you know it? Oedipus had kids, 4 in fact, 2 sons, Eteocles and Polynices, and 2 daughters, Antigone and Ismene. They were born of a marriage that no one involved realized was, shall we say, problematic. But now that the truth is out, the whole family is left wobbling under a mythic weight heavier than all the bronze shields in Greece. Let's focus on the sons first. Eteocles and Polynices are next in line for the throne of Thebes. The plan is simple. They'll take turns ruling, a year each. Seems fair. Almost modern. Of course, this being a Greek myth, the arrangement lasts about as long as an Olivet Spartan picnic. Eteocles goes first, rules for a year, and then he doesn't step down. Polynices, not thrilled about being ghosted by his own bloodline, gathers an army. Not just any army. He convinces 6 other commanders to join him in an epic, ill-advised assault on Thebes. This becomes the myth of the 7 against Thebes. Now, in any other story, this would be the big climactic battle scene, helmets gleaming, spears thrown, stirring orchestral music. But this is your bedtime story, so instead, we're going to meander gently through the chaos like a slightly bored oracle, narrating from a sunny balcony. The battle rages, sure. But the key moment is this. The 2 brothers meet in single combat, and they kill each other simultaneously. A perfect mythic symmetry. Brother against brother. 2 sides of the same cursed coin. You breathe out slowly. There's something almost serene about the tragedy. Not fair, not just, but symmetrical. Like the gods needed a clean end to a tangled thread. Now the sisters, Antigone, the moral backbone of the family, now faces her own dilemma. King Creon, yes, that Creon, the one who always seems to pop up when the monarchy's in need of a solid chin and a questionable decree, has taken power. He declares that Eteocles, who defended the city, shall be buried with honors. But Polynices, the attacker, is to be left unburied, rotting, a feast for birds, which in Greek terms is about the worst punishment imaginable. Denying burial was denying peace in the afterlife. It's like putting a "Do Not Disturb" sign on someone's soul, permanently. Antigone can't let that stand. She sneaks out, covers her brother's body with soil, just enough to count. To signal dignity, she's caught, of course. Creon is furious, orders her to be sealed alive in a cave. Yes, you heard that right, a tomb for the living. Classic myth punishment, more poetic than practical. She dies there by her own hand. And in a cascade of grief, Creon's son, who loved Antigone, and his wife also die. It's tragedy by domino effect. Historians still argue whether Antigone was meant to be a political hero, a moral one, or just another example of a woman crushed by male stubbornness. She's been reimagined endlessly by playwrights, philosophers, even punk rock bands, all trying to figure out what it means to follow your conscience when the world says no. But for tonight, Antigone is simply a girl with a shovel, standing in a moonlit field saying, "This is my brother, and you're resting now, head on your pillow, breath soft." You can almost hear the dry wind over Thebes, rustling old stones, brushing over battlefields now overgrown with time and silence. Quirky aside, ancient Theban coins sometimes bore the image of the Sphinx, like a badge of riddled honor, as if the city leaned into its weird legacy, wore its traumas like a sash. Yes, we're that place, the cursed one, but we've got character, and Thebes does have character. A city born of bovine coincidence and dragon's teeth, shaped by gods in disguise and children of impossible unions. It survived madness, murder, and mutiny. It changed names more than once, was rebuilt, destroyed, rebuilt again. Even Alexander the Great flattened it, well, most of it, and still it came back. There's something soothing about that. No matter how many curses fall, how many prophecies are fulfilled in the worst possible way, Thebes persists, like a stubborn weed, or a beloved great aunt who's been through 6 wars and still makes her own jam. You let your mind wander over its tangled streets now. Picture the quiet of its early morning markets. A potter yawning as he opens shop, a sleepy goat nibbling, a tunic, the slow hum of life inching forward in spite of everything, and somewhere, far away, a cow lowing in the distance. Thebes remembers, but you don't have to, not tonight. You're still here, and Thebes still stands, although now it feels more like a memory than a city, a dreamscape of collapsed temples and scattered olive pits, of women whispering by fountains and ghostly warriors pacing old ramparts. One last layer remains to unearth, like the soft dust on a museum floor that muffles even the footsteps of time. After the fall of its famous figures, Cadmus, Oedipus, Antigone, Thebes doesn't vanish from myth, not yet. But its spotlight dims. New stories rise in other cities, Athens, Corinth, Troy. Thebes becomes something quieter, more spectral. Its final mythic act? A curious epilogue featuring one of the most misunderstood women in the ancient world, Tiresias. Wait, woman. Yes, you caught that. Tiresias, the blind prophet of Thebes, is famous not only for his eerie calm and divine hotline to Olympus, but for the fact that he once lived as both a man and a woman, or rather, he was transformed by divine accident while walking in the woods. Picture it. You're just out for a casual stroll, maybe thinking about dinner, and you come across 2 snakes mating. What do? Tiresias inexplicably strikes them with a stick, as one does. The gods respond with flair. He is turned into a woman, lives that way for several years, some versions say 7, and even becomes a priestess of Hera. Some say she marries, has children, lives fully in that skin. Others claim she simply adapts, as mortals must when the gods get creative. Then, one day she encounters the same scene. 2 snakes, once again mid-romance. This time she lets them be, or strikes them again. Scholars differ. It depends on how the gods are feeling that day. Either way, bam, back to being a man. Now, what makes this relevant isn't just the transformation. It's what happens next. The gods, ever petty, start an argument. Hera and Zeus are bickering over whether men or women enjoy, let's say, the art of love more. Naturally, they decide to ask Tiresias, who has conveniently tried both perspectives. Tiresias sides with Zeus. Big mistake. Hera, furious at the answer, blinds him. Zeus, feeling vaguely responsible, compensates by giving him second sight, the gift of prophecy. And so, Tiresias becomes the reluctant seer of Thebes, the one who knows too much and is never thanked for it. He appears in story after story, always calm, always cryptic, like a GPS that tells you where you're headed, but only in riddles. There's something peaceful about him, isn't there? A soft-spoken figure in a world of shouting kings and impulsive heroes. He doesn't chase glory or war. He listens, advises, watches it all unfold like a man sipping bitter wine on a rainy porch. And when he dies, according to some myths, he continues giving prophecies even from the underworld. Now that's customer service. His legacy is strange, tangled, and deeply human. In a pantheon obsessed with muscle, bloodlines, and divine tantrums, Tiresias offers something else. The comfort of someone who's already seen the worst, and yet still finds the words, and perhaps in the final sigh of Theban myth, it's Tiresias who represents the city best. Not its soldiers, not its queens, not even its riddles, but the act of enduring, of watching everything crumble, yet knowing somehow that the story goes on. Thebes, by this point, is mostly ruins. Real historians will tell you it was sacked by Alexander the Great in 335 BCE and rebuilt shortly afterward, though never with quite the same spark. Its days of divine cows and dragon warriors had passed. It became just another city until the Romans came, until the Byzantines came, until tourists with guidebooks came, wondering what all the fuss had been about. But for those who listen, Thebes is never really gone. It lingers like a scent, old, myrrh, dry stone, burnt laurel. Quirky fact for your dreams tonight. The name Cadmean victory lives on in English, referring to a victory so costly it's basically a loss. Like when you win a board game, but your entire family is no longer speaking to you. And so, we reach the end of Thebes, a city that began with a wandering cow and ended with a blind prophet muttering truths no one wants to hear. You close your eyes, maybe, and picture it. The gates of Thebes just before dawn, the breeze carrying old laughter and the clink of bronze, a single lyre string humming somewhere far off, and the long, gentle hush of myth winding down.